Welcome, traveler. Close your eyes, breathe softly, and let your mind drift back 2,000 years. You are about to walk the most legendary road in human history. It begins in the ancient city of Xi'an, deep in the heart of China, under a sky painted with the dust of camel hooves and the whispers of incense. Xi'an is bustling with traders. The air smells like jasmine tea, and the wind carries murmurs of faraway lands. Silk merchants wrap brilliant fabrics, dyed with crushed flower crimson. Your journey has just begun. Slowly, the city fades, and endless steps unfold. You pass through the yellow river, through dusty plains, guarded by the Great Wall. Under the endless sky, there are no borders, only stars, sand, and stories. Your caravan stops in Dunhuang, an oasis of knowledge and spiritual treasure. There, inside caves, carved into desert cliffs, lie thousands of scrolls, Buddhist texts, Taoist poetry, ancient maps. You light an oil lamp. You enter the Taklamakan desert. The camels moan under the sun. Sand sings as it shifts. You follow dried riverbeds and hidden wells. You sleep beneath a sky where the same stars once guided Alexander the Great. Mirages flicker, some are illusions, some are real cities. You reach Kashgar, a crossroads of civilization. Here, Persians, Turks, Uyghurs, Chinese, and Greeks meet. The bazaar swells with saffron. You hear over a dozen languages. Storytellers sit at carpets and whisper tales of golden palaces, flying carpets, and glass towers from India to Samarkand. One route climbs into the Pamir Mountains, jagged peaks that pierce the sky. You take the high road. You barter your silk for lapis lazuli gemstones, once thought to be fragments of the sky and perfume laced with myrrh. Glaciers whisper to each other in winds older than empires. The road splits. Snow crunches beneath your boots as you ascend. Up here, the world is silent. Sherpas guide your path as you descend into the valley of Samarkand, the jewel of the East. Samarkand greets you with turquoise domes and golden minarets. Scholars debate philosophy under arched libraries. Astronomers chart stars on polished brass instruments. You learn of numbers from India. You sit among roses in a walled garden. Recites who tell you that knowledge is the most profitable cargo. Further west, you arrive in Persia, land of poetry and fire temples. Zoroastrian priests tend to sacred flames that never die. A scholar shows you an astrolabe, explaining how it maps the heavens. You trade cinnamon and star anise for manuscripts. From Persia, you cross into the Roman Empire, reaching Antioch, where East meets West in a tangle of cultures. Roman officials wear silks from China they've never seen, transported on the backs of 100 camels. You walk marble streets. As a Roman historian interviews you, you don't tell him everything. Some secrets must stay along the road. Later, in Constantinople, you admire mosaics lit by candlelight. Christian monks, Muslim philosophers, and Jewish scribes share scrolls in the shadows of domes. Here, even the air hums with debate. You realize the Silk Road is not a road at all. It's an idea, a path made of human curiosity, stitched together by trade, trust, and wonder. Spices from India, glass from Rome, silk from China, stories from everywhere, they swirl in your satchel like magic. You reflect on the inventions born along this route. They passed not only through hands, and then you turn back east, your caravan heavy with more than goods, ideas, languages, recipes, beliefs. Back in Xi'an, you carried whispers across deserts and mountains. And though the Silk Road may fade from maps, its spirit lives in every bridge, every library, every spice rack and skyline touched by a whisper from afar. This was your journey through 4,000 miles of trade and secrets. You were not just a traveler, were a thread in history's grandest tapestry. The journey continues, winding westward, across lands both familiar and forgotten. As you leave the glittering domes of Constantinople, ships sway gently in the harbor, passing through hands that have never seen their origins. You walk the ancient Roman roads, stepping where emperors, generals, and merchants once dreamed of conquest or trade. Your path turns inland again. The Silk Road was never a single route, but a vast web of choices overland. Over sea, you choose to follow the northern route this time, through the Caucasus, where languages change with the landscape. In the markets of Tbilisi, you drink wine made from grapes, grown on mountain terraces, and hear lullabies, sung in tongues you do not know, but still understand. Each new voice along the road carries a piece of a puzzle, a fragment of humanity's shared code. You descend into Armenia, where monasteries cling to cliffs, and the sound of chanted prayers echoes through stone chambers. There, a monk carves letters into thick, leather-bound books, preserving knowledge for future travelers. He speaks to you of caravans that passed a century ago, and of rumors that they still echo on windy nights. The Silk Road is more than trade. It is memory. From here, your path forks again. This time, you follow the Caspian Sea's western shores, riding with traders from Bukhara, who tell jokes in 5 languages and count profits in gold coins from 3 kingdoms. They carry textiles dyed with walnut shells. One of them, an old man with eyes like polished stone, tells you he once traveled to India by way of Hormuz. You ask him about the sea route, and he whispers about a floating silk road ships, Zanzibar, and even Alexandria. In Bukhara, you stop for rest. It is a city of scholars, storytellers, and merchants with eyes that have seen every corner of the world. In its heart stands a towering minaret, a lighthouse for the land. You sit beside a pool surrounded by mulberry trees, listening to a philosopher speak of how ideas travel faster than camels. You realize again that the Silk Road is not a road at all, it's a heartbeat. In the quiet moments, it pulses gently beneath your feet. You meet a healer from India carrying pouches of turmeric, cardamom, and asaf. She teaches you how scent and taste can become a language. She speaks of Ayurvedic scrolls and healing rituals passed down across generations. You trade her Chinese tea in exchange for dried petals that smell like ancient temples. As you move farther east again, you are now crossing the Tian Shan Mountains, whose peaks seem to touch eternity. The air here is thin, the snow eternal. You feel smaller than the stars. At night, you lie wrapped in a yak wool blanket, listening to the wind tell stories in the voices of travelers long gone. Snow leopards watch from rocky ledges, and just when the cold begins to grip your bones, you descend into the Fergana Valley, a land of silk, horses, and orchards. The Fergana horses sweat like blood. We are those. They are fast, powerful. You ride one briefly, understanding why emperors once sent armies to possess them. The valley is full of apricot trees and villagers. Here you meet silk weavers who explain that every thread tells a story, sometimes a wedding, sometimes a war. A woman dips her fingers into dye. She does not speak much, but her hands speak enough. You move on toward the Tarim Basin. The desert is silent, wide, and soft, like an old thought. You pass ruins swallowed by sand-ghost cities, where once bustling bazaars echoed with laughter and trade. Nor you stop at Nia, where archaeologists once found letters written in Kharosthi script, detailing debts. Even the mundane becomes magic. At night, you follow the moon. You arrive in Turpan. It is a marvel of engineering. Farmers invite you to taste sun-dried raisins and plums. A local historian invites you into a library where scrolls whisper. You feel that knowledge here is both practical and poetic. Before leaving, you listen closely and think you can still hear the footsteps of Xuanzang, the Chinese monk who walked this path in search of Buddhist scriptures. His story weaves with yours. You press forward to Hami, famous for jade and melons. Your caravan is larger, now joined by Turks. You all sit under a tent of stars. Someone plays a reed flute, while another brews. You all fall asleep to the scent of roasted lamb and the quiet knowledge that none of you will ever forget this night. Back on the road, you head east, toward Dunhuang once more. But this time, you notice more. The caves are deeper. The murals seem to breathe. You now recognize the blend of Persian, Indian, and Chinese styles painted into the walls. This is not art, it is history's face. You sit beside a monk who is copying texts into Chinese. He tells you that true wisdom must be translated again and again to stay alive. You nod. The wind outside carries grains of sand, each one holding a memory. And then, the final stretch. The city rises like a mirage, but grows solid as you approach. You pass through vermilion gates, beneath dragon carvings. You are different. The Silk Road has carved invisible patterns into your mind. You no longer see goods, you see connections. You see how a flower in India becomes dye in Samarkand. You walk the streets of Chang'an, not as a stranger, but as a thread. You visit your old merchant friends who barely recognize the dust-covered, sun-warmed version of you. You tell them stories, not of goods, but of people, of the old man from the silent weaver. And then you sit alone with tea and parchment and begin to write. You write, not a ledger, but a memory. You try to describe the feeling of the desert at dawn. You realize the Silk Road is a mirror. It reflects your curiosity. It shows you that every culture is not separate, but interwoven. You are no longer just a traveler. You are a storyteller, a bridge. And as the city lights flicker and fade, you know that this was never just a journey across land, it was a journey across time and soul. You close your eyes, the wind gently brushing your cheeks, and you hear it. Again the road, still whispering, always whispering. The Silk Road does not sleep. Long after you return to Chang'an, it lives on in the minds of those you met and the cities you passed through. But your journey isn't over. The road invites you once more, this time to trace the southern trade, routes less traveled. You gather your things and join a new caravan, this time heading toward the southwestern edge of China, through the lush forests and rising mists of Xi'an. You pass bamboo groves that sway like dancers, and the hum of cicadas fills the air like invisible music. He says little, but every night he draws constellations in the dirt, whispering how stars guide both ships and souls. Together you reach Chengdu, where tea first bloomed and poetry flows like water. In a quiet courtyard, they speak of mountains with dragon veins, of cloud-breathing sages, and of immortality not as escape, but as understanding. From Chengdu, these are the tea horse roads, where Chinese tea was traded for Tibetan ponies. You watch, crossing into Tibet. Every color has a meaning: sky, wind. You reach Lhasa, the city of gods. Golden rooftops. Monks chant in unison. You kneel before a spinning prayer wheel and feel time shift. A trader from Lodic offers you turquoise in exchange for tea. He tells you of valleys so high that even the moon feels near, of salt caravans and frozen rivers used as roads. You follow him west, crossing the trans-Himalayan routes. It's a world above the world. The nights are long, but the stars are so bright they seem close enough to touch. You arrive in Le, where India breathes gently into Central Asia. Markets here hold saffron from Kashmir, wool from Mongolia. You follow the Indus River southward, toward the lands once ruled by empires long buried in dust. In Taxila, you walk through ruins where Greek columns stand beside Buddhist stupas. Nor you, the past whispers to you from stone carvings, temple steps, and broken amphorae. You cross into the fertile plains of northern India. The cities of Varanasi and Mathura unfold before you, places where the Ganges flows not just as water. Here silk is dyed with indigo and turmeric, and gold is weighed against its beauty. You attend a fire ritual beside the riverbank. As lamps float down the river, it was about meaning, shared rituals, shared hopes. A scholar in Varanasi speaks of Nalanda. You imagine the halls filled with students from Korea, China, Tibet, and Persia debating logic, medicine, and the shape of the soul. You move further south to the coast of Gujarat. The port city of Bharuch greets you with salt wind and seagulls. You see Chinese ceramics stacked beside Arabic incense and Roman glass beads. The Indian Ocean hums with life. You board a dhow bound for Hormuz, the island gate to Persia. Onboard sailors chart the monsoon winds with centuries of memory. No compasses needed. The ocean is not empty, it is a road in itself. In Hormuz, spices from Java, ivory from Africa, and pearls from Bahrain gather in warehouses that smell like the world. You hear rumors of Chinese treasure fleets. You follow this maritime road to Muscat, then to Aden. You meet Somali sailors who sing as they mend nets, and Yemeni merchants who speak of desert cities paved in salt. Onward to Cairo, where pyramids whisper across millennia. In the shadow of the Nile, you hear tales of Alexandria's library, and how some say scrolls survived, hidden in the labyrinth beneath the city. You continue into the Mediterranean. The sea is calm, but your thoughts You land in Rhodes, then Crete. In Athens, you meet a philosopher who asks what you have truly learned. You pause not because you don't know, but because the answer is too large for one breath. You realize it was never just goods. It was the way ideas move, the way cultures reflect each other like mirrors held to the sun. You travel north through the Balkans. In Dubrovnik, you arrive in Venice, in the grand hall of a merchant's palace. You see a map of the world, Xi'an in one corner, Europe in another, and the Silk Road weaving through them like a vein of gold. You trace the route with your finger. You've walked it, but it's still not done. You hear of another path northward through the Rus lands to Scandinavia. You ride beside rivers that freeze in winter and flow like arteries in spring. In Novgorod, a Viking sword wrapped in Chinese silk rests in a wooden caisson. You reach the fjords of Norway, where cliffs plunge into deep blue water. Here, the Silk Road ends or begins again. And you understand. The Silk Road is not a line, not a path, not a place. It is a rhythm, a conversation that began when humans first looked beyond the horizon and wondered, what's out there? It is the longest dialogue in history between north and south, east and west, past and future. You sit beside the sea, your satchel empty of goods. You take out the journal you started in Xi'an. You write a new one. The world is stitched together by silence, by trust, by trade, by wonder. As the waves crash below and the wind whistles above, you close your eyes, and the Silk Road whispers once more, soft, eternal, waiting. The Silk Road flows like memory, sometimes slow and steady, other times sharp and full of sudden beauty. Now you return eastward again. What once seemed like isolated cities are now glimmering beads on a single invisible string. You begin in Venice once more, walking narrow alleys beside canals. That glimmer. The merchants recognize you now, not by face, but by the scent of distant lands on your clothing. You pass the docks where crates are loaded with coral and cinnamon, bound for the Adriatic, and feel the hum of commerce like a heartbeat beneath the stones. You travel northeast. Here, the Silk Road took on new forms through guild halls, universities, and forgotten corridors. In a librarian leads you down marble stairs into an archive where books bound in camel leather rest on iron shelves. One smells faintly of cardamom. The librarian smiles. These are books that traveled farther than armies, she says. You realize that in the colder reaches of the Silk Road, it wasn't silk or jade that mattered. Most words woven into parchment that crossed borders like whispers. You cross the steppes once again. In Kazakhstan, the wind rushes across endless plains, where eagles soar above you are welcomed by Kazakh nomads who pour fermented mare's milk and sing songs that stretch like the landscape long. They speak of an old city buried under the grass, where caravans once camped and stars guided their dreams. You ride to the ruins, where only fragments of pottery and half-buried stone paths remain. But when you sit quietly, you can hear the past, echoing horse hooves, laughter, the soft clinking of trade beads, passed from palm to palm. You keep moving. The road takes you east again, back to Samarkand. You stay at the same inn and in the courtyard. The apricot trees have ripened again. Time loops gently here. You meet a young poet who writes verses in 3 languages. He tells you he dreams of traveling to Kyoto, and you tell him stories of the tea gardens there, though you've never been. The magic of the Silk Road. It allows you to see places through the voices of others. You follow the Zarafshan River upstream into the mountains that cradle Tajikistan. There, in the Pamir Ranges, you walk beside shepherds who speak of ancient towers built to mark the road for passing caravans. Some are broken now, but they still stand like quiet sentinels. The river sings, and the stones beneath your feet feel warm from centuries of sunlight. You reach a village where mulberries are harvested and silk is spun by hand. You watch the process again. The threads shine in the golden light. Silk carries memory. In her workshop, you see fragments of silk from distant lands, patterns from Persia, dyes from India, techniques from China. It's all here, mingled like rivers converging. You travel down into the valleys of Kyrgyzstan. You stay in a yurt beneath the stars and listen to a dombra being played by a grandfather with a voice like soft gravel. He sings of love, lost to distance, of horses born under of traders who vanished in snowstorms but whose names are still sung. In the morning, you help tie down the yurt canvas and pack for the next leg of the journey. As you descend into Xinjiang, the Tarim Basin greets you once more, but this time you travel its outer curve. You stop in Korla, a city of pomegranate orchards and ancient wells. Traders offer you dried fruits in exchange for stories. You tell them about the Viking sword wrapped in Chinese silk on the Silk Road. You continue east through the Lop Desert, one of the driest places on earth. The sand is soft and fine, like powdered gold. You stop at Moran, once a vibrant center of art and worship. Now only fragments remain, mural faces gazing up from broken walls, colors still bright after 1,000 years. A traveling monk explains that even ruins breathe. They exhale history, he says. As you reach Dunhuang again, a sandstorm begins to rise. You take shelter in the Mogao caves, the same ones you visited once before, but now you see deeper. A hidden chamber has opened newly, discovered by a team of researchers. Inside are scrolls. One scroll is unrolled before you. Its characters are clear, painted in ink, made from crushed minerals and tea. It is a Buddhist sutra. A scholar nearby nods and says, "This scroll has traveled more than any man," and you believe her. You walk the corridor of murals once again. They tell stories, not just of faith. You touch the cool stone and feel time fold around your fingers. You travel now through Gansu province. In Tianshui, inside Statues of serene Buddhas look down on you as swallows circle the sky outside. You feel watched, but gently, like the past is offering you a place at its table. As you approach Xi'an, the scent of whetstone and blooming lotus fills the air. The road is familiar now. You enter the city. In the market, nothing has changed. You revisit the tea house, the host. You sit, and as the tea is poured, you begin to speak, not to trade, but to tell, to weave what you've seen into memory, into language, into breath. The Silk Road, you say, was never about one place meeting another. It was about the spaces in between, the pauses between steps, the bridges between hearts, the empty desert that held so many secrets. You speak of the sea that knew the stars better than maps, of ruins that whispered in moonlight, of monks who saw time as a wheel, not a line. The others listen, nodding slowly. They too have walked, listened, tasted, lost, loved. They too are part of the road. As the night deepens, you walk the city streets. A child chases a paper kite. A musician plays the guqin. You walk until the street's empty and only the sound of your footsteps remains. And then you pause, placing your hand on the old city wall. You feel it breathe. The Silk Road breathes. It has always breathed through you. The Silk Road is not just a journey across space. It is a journey through time. In this next stretch of the road, from Chang'an, the great capital of dynasties, thoughts, you visit a scholar's garden in the city, where bamboo sways in slow rhythm with the wind. He sits with an abacus and scrolls of Confucian texts, but also beside him lies a Greek coin, worn by time. Everything is welcome here, he whispers. Even echoes. You take the southern route now, following the path that snakes toward. It is greener here. You pass tea plantations, terrace like stairways to the sky. Here tea was not only traded but elevated into ritual. A monk shows you how to pour it with intention, with stillness, as if each drop contains an entire journey. He tells you that tea was once bartered for horses, pound for pound, along this very road. You imagine those horses now manes, flying through wind, carrying bolts of silk and bags of pepper. The Silk Road carried flavors, too. You arrive at a spice market, dizzy with color. Chili, clove, turmeric, saffron spices. That came from India, from Arabia, even from the Horn of Africa. Each one with a story. A woman at a stall lets you try a pinch of Persian sumac. This was once worth more than gold, she tells you, and you believe her. You trace the road down into Yunnan province, where the terrain grows mountainous again. You ride mules on switchback trails, their bells ringing into the mist. This part of the road, once connected to the ancient Tea Horse Road, a lesser-known sibling of the Silk Road, but no less alive. You pass through villages where paper is still made by hand. In one, an old artisan shows you how to float the pulp on water, press it with wood, and let it dry in mountain air. Paper is how we captured the wind, he says. You continue south toward Doli and Lejiang cities, once humming with trade from Tibet and Myanmar. In Lijiang, water channels run through the town like silver veins. The Naxi people greet you with music flutes made of bone, drums of stretched skin, voices layered like hills. You are invited to a ceremony where they light lanterns and float them on the river. Each one carries a wish. Yours is simple: to keep walking, to keep listening. The road now curves westward. You are entering the realm where Buddhism flowed outward, carried on the backs of pilgrims and monks. You retrace the footsteps of Xuanzang. His journey, too, became legend. You stop at monasteries, where his story is still told, how he brought back scriptures, translated them, and in doing so, changed the path of belief itself. In one temple, a saffron-robed monk lets you hold a block of wood once used to print sutras. The grooves are worn, but you can still feel the characters carved in devotion. This is how we multiplied thought, with hands. From here, you take a turn back north, into Qinghai, and then across the Tibetan plateau. Here the air is thinner, but the silence is deeper. You find yourself alone for long stretches. A hermit offers you salted butter tea and speaks of sky burial, of offering one's body back to the earth. You sit together on a hill and watch the stars rise, so many, so bright. They seem to whisper. The Silk Road, he says, never truly disappears. It just changes form. You descend into Nepal, entering the Kathmandu Valley. The road narrows, but grows richer. Here Hinduism and Buddhism blend like ink in water. At a temple, you hear bells, smell incense, and watch marigolds being scattered over stone statues older than many kingdoms. A young boy recites a mantra, not from memory, but from the soul. You ask him what it means, and he simply says, "Peace across distances." You smile. That is the Silk Road. You follow it into northern India now, arriving at. Here trade was spiritual as much as material. You see beads traded for prayers. You stay in an ashram. The teacher there tells you that even language traveled the Silk Road. The way the word for sugar shows up from India to Italy, the way grammar and rhythm move with caravans. You travel west. Now, across the Thar Desert, in Rajasthan, traders once rode camels from here all the way to Persia. You walk. It's ancient, Havelis. A boy draws you a map in the sand, showing the old caravan route through Sind. Follow this, and you will find the desert that dreams. You follow it. You reach the Indus Valley, older than the Silk Road, yet strangely aligned. In Mohenjo-daro, a guide tells you that even before the Silk Road, the road did not begin in China or end in Rome. It began in desire, the desire to connect. You continue into Persia, into Isfahan. The domes shimmer like inverted heavens, blue tile, gold inlay, marble, cooled by fountains. You sit beneath the chic Lotfala Mosque, watching pigeons wheel through columns. A calligrapher lets you try your hand at Arabic script. Your fingers tremble, but the ink flows smooth. Writing, he tells you, is a road too. You walk the bazaar against cinnamon. You recognize smells from cities. You travel to Shiraz, the city of poets. At the tomb of Hafiz, people come not to mourn, but to celebrate. They read his verses like scripture. You listen. I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. You carry those words with you. The road brings you to Baghdad, reborn again and again, in a quiet courtyard. It contains formulas from India, diagrams from Greece, philosophies from China Wall, translated, refined, shared. The Silk Road was once a nervous system of thought, alive. You sit beside the Tigris and watch it flow, as it always has, as it always will. And still, the road continues. You pass through Damascus, Aleppo, then cross into the Levant. The air shifts against cypress and cedar. The tempts of sea nearby. You reach Tyre. You walk among columns rising from grass, stone walls that once heard traders speak in dozens of tongues. The Mediterranean appears at last. You follow the coast to Alexandria, a city of scholars, of forgotten scrolls. Here, the Silk Road met the sea, not as an ending. You stand where once stood the great library. You whisper a word, and the stone seems to answer back. The journey has not ended. It only changes shape, because the Silk Road is not a place, a thread, a longing. It lives not just in sand and stone. The Silk Road did not end at the short, dissolved into the sea. You are now standing at the edge of the Mediterranean, where cargo once shifted from camel to sail, where winds carried silk and spice farther than hooves ever could. Here begins the maritime Silk Road, a lesser-known sibling. You board a dhow at dawn. The sail unfurls like a poem. The captain speaks in soft Arabic. The boat sways gently, and you begin to understand that the road was never just one path. It was thousands of them braided. Your first port is Aden, gateway of Arabia. The air is thick with incense. A trader offers you a handful of resin amber-colored tears. He tells you that once Roman emperors paid their weight in gold for this scent. You inhale. It smells like sun-warmed stone and holy secret. As you move eastward by sea, you arrive in Socotra, the island of myths. Trees grow in shapes like umbrellas tipped upside down. A healer grinds dried herbs into powder. This island, she whispers, was a stop for traders and spirits alike. You watch as seabirds drift. You reach Kilwa, the ruined still stamlosks of coral stone, arches that echo with voices once speaking Persian, Arabic, Bantu. You walk through an ancient market square. A fisherman shows you one blue cymbals curled on white. We never made these, he says with a smile, but we ate off them. In Zanzibar, cloves once made the island scent the wind itself. You are shown a plantation where workers pluck clove buds like stars from the trees. A woman tells you that ships from China and Gujarat and Oman once docked here, all for this one small flower. She places a clove in your hand, but it could move an empire across the Indian Ocean now. The stars guide you like they did ancient navigators. You learn how traders followed the monsoon winds east in summer, west in winter. The sea was not an obstacle. It was a road made of rhythm. You land in Calicut, India, where the scent of cardamom and coriander clings to everything. You enter a spice warehouse, walls stained dark from centuries of trade. In the corner, a ledger from the 1400s. Pepper was once counted like coins, cinnamon like secrets. You are told stories of Zheng He, the great Chinese admiral who once docked here with ships taller than temples, bearing porcelain animals and silk so fine it floated on the breeze. You stand at the shoreline where his fleet once dropped anchor and imagine the sails stretching like wings. From Calicut, the road moves inland again. You travel to Hampi. Giant boulders balance on hillsides. Traders here once bought Chinese silk in exchange for gemstones and war horses. You see remnants of bazaars built into rock stalls, now silent. In the temple, a musician taps out rhythms on a stone pillar that rings like a bell. Everything was vibration, he says. Even trade. You head to Sri Lanka next. The island rises from the sea like a jeweled crown. You climb Sigiriya. In Colombo, you enter a museum where Roman coins sit beside Ming vases. A curator tells you that sailors here spoke 5 languages before they were 12. The road wasn't straight, she says. It curved with every coast, every tongue. You sail onward through the straits of Malacca, past mangroves and temples, and the glitter of cities born from ports in Malacca itself. Now Malaysia, you enter a spice museum. There, you learn of how the Chinese, Arabs, and Tamils built this city. Together layer by layer, tongue by tongue, you touch a map that traces the sea route in fine gold ink. It looks like a constellation. You arrive in Vietnam, in Xi'an, where lanterns float on the river and the old wooden buildings. Chinese merchants once lived upstairs. You sip lotus tea beside a porcelain shop that still has a Song Dynasty pot on its shelf. The shopkeeper tells you, it came by sea. It's always been here, he says. Even before we knew what here was. The boat turns north, into China's southern coast. You dock in Chuanzhou. You walk through the Caravan temple, where carvings from different cultures sit side by side, and Persian tombs lie under banyan trees. At the Maritime Museum, you see shipwrecked treasure porcelain dishes, iron anchors, coins from Egypt, each one a memory pulled from the deep. The ocean, a guide whispers, remembers everything. You now return inland. You visit Hangzhou, once described by Marco Polo as the most beautiful city on earth. The Westlake lies before you like a silver mirror. Silk was spun here with such care that emperors wore only what came from these looms. You watch a weaver work on a machine older than empires. Her hands move like water, her breath soft as thread. Silk is patience, she says. So is memory. In Suzhou, you enter a scholar's garden where each rock is placed with intention. You walk past calligraphy walls and bonsai trees. This was a city of elegance. The gardens were built with money from merchants who once bartered sugar for stone, pearls for poetry. You see a scroll hanging from a wall. You arrive at the terminus of the sea. Here his great treasure ships were built. You stand in the shipyard, now overgrown, but still echoing with the sound of timber and vision. A stone stele stands tall, inscribed in 3 languages. You place your hand on it and feel time ripple. The road does not end. You travel back westward, this time not as a merchant, but as a witness. The Silk Road is now beneath your skin. You see it in the way cultures blend at the edges. In a Lebanese cafe playing Indian music. In a Chinese restaurant serving Persian ice cream. In a Turkish carpet woven with motifs from Mongolia. You walk through Istanbul again. You see how domes, how minarets stretch. You see people wearing jeans and headscarves, sneakers, and saris. The Silk Road did not vanish. It shifted. You follow its modern shadows into Europe. In Venice, you walk the old merchant quarters, where Marco Polo once returned with tales, so strange they were thought lies. You enter a chamber where old maps show Cathay and Serica, lands of gold and tea. A gondolier tells you that Venetian glass was once made to mimic Chinese porcelain. That imitation was not insulted, was awe. In Florence, you visit the Medici archive. You see letters requesting silks. You are told that the Renaissance itself may owe some of its flame to embers blown westward by trade winds. What is art, a scholar says, but exchange? You take a train to Paris, walk the Louvre, notice the influences, Chinese motifs in French tapestries, Persian geometry in Gothic windows, a Japanese lacquer box. It was a spiral, a conversation, a long breath shared between strangers. You arrive in London. In the British Museum, you stand before an ancient scroll from Dunhuang. You sit and listen. You understand now. It lives in every moment of meeting. Every time you hear a word you cannot define but still feel. It lives in fusion, in curiosity, in shared humanity. You step outside. The world feels larger and yet more intimate. You realize the Silk Road never ended. It just became the street beneath your feet, the aisle in the market, the network that pulses behind every message, every movement, every map. It is not a relic. It is the breath of the world, still whispering. Along the ancient routes of the Silk Road, knowledge was traded just as eagerly as spices or jade. It moved in whispers, in symbols inked on scrolls, in stories passed around a fire. You begin this part of your journey in the heart of Bukhara, a city that rose like a pearl in the desert. Its library stands like a forgotten temple. Inside, the scent of ink and parchment fills the air. A scholar greets you silently and hands you a worn manuscript. Its margins are filled with notes in multiple languages, added by travelers over centuries. The scholar smiles. Each hand left a trace, he says. You feel them all, reaching through time. One corridor leads to another. There, mathematicians once debated geometry beneath turquoise domes. You imagine their voices, rising and falling like wind. You leave with a feeling of quiet reverence, as if carrying something fragile and eternal. Your path takes you east, into the mountain shadows of the Tian Shan. You meet a healer who teaches you how herbs were shared along the road. She shows you dried petals. Juniperand explains how each one traveled in pockets. She mixes a tea that warms your chest, and as you drink, she tells you the recipe came from a traveler from Kashmir who once bartered for silk. Her hands are lined, gentle, and precise. You watch her work and feel that knowledge isn't just in Kashgar. You walk into a school that still teaches classical Yuga poetry. Children sit cross-legged, reciting verses older than the bricks beneath them. A teacher gestures to you. Listen, she says. These poems came from the road. The rhythm is soft, hypnotic. Each line carries wind. A student translates. The road is a ribbon of breath, tying hearts from east to west. You nod. That's exactly what it feels like. Further east, you pass through Turpan, a desert basin where water channels cast invented thousands of years ago. They still guide the flow of life. You speak with an engineer who maps the system. Every channel is like a thread, he explains. Together they form a tapestry of survival. He lets you trace one channel underground. The air is cool. Water trickles beside your feet. You think about how ingenuity moved alongside goods, how the Silk Road was built, not just with camels and coin. In the markets of Xi'an, he paints a single character meaning connection. This word, he says softly. He dips his brush again and shows you variations. Love, respect, harmony, wisdom. Each traveler wrote a little of themselves into the road, he says. You keep the paper carefully folded. You visit an old observatory. Here, Chinese astronomers charted constellations used by sailors from Arabia and Persia. The stars were a universal language. One chart shows a dragon-shaped constellation mirrored by a scorpion known in Babylon. You think of the same sky arcing over Rome, Samarkand, Dunhuang. In a nearby room, you see an abacus resting beside a set of Roman numerals etched into stone. Tools from opposite ends of the road. In a coastal town along the South China Sea, on the walls are carvings showing ships, caravans, and animals unknown to each other: camels, elephants, parrots. The caretaker explains that this place was built by merchants who came by land, then left by sea. You realize then that the Silk Road didn't end. It simply flowed into waves. Maritime routes became liquid threads, extending to Java. In Guangzhou, you visit a shipyard where old maps are carved into stone. The routes curve and twist like veins. You follow one path with your finger from the port. The stones are smooth from centuries of touch. You meet a merchant who explains how silk was packed with porcelain, how cloves rode beside jade, how the scent of cinnamon was once worth more than silver. His stories are steady, like waves, and you begin to feel the rhythm of trade, not as economy, but as relationship. Back inland, you stop at a university in Nanjing where records show Buddhist monks translating Sanskrit sutras into Chinese. The library holds their work. One scroll is partially singed at the edges, yet the characters inside remain perfectly intact, carried through fire. The librarian says. And still here, you feel that phrase echo, carried through fire. Just like the road itself, you meet a linguist who explains how many modern Chinese words for medicine, spices, and fabrics came from Persian, Sanskrit, and Arabic roots. You look at a chart, each word a point on a map. Language became a vessel. He smiles. The road lives in the words we use every day. In Luoyang, seismograph saw innovations shared through contact with other cultures. You examine a wooden printer's block. Its surface, worn, smooth. A guide tells you this helped ideas travel faster than horses. In a quiet corner, a replica of a Hanira compass rests beside an Indian astrolabe and a Babylonian water clock. Each one points not just in directions, but in time, in memory. You pass a musician playing a pipa near the river. Her song blends Persian rhythms with Chinese melody. She smiles when she sees you listening. Music walks too. It knows no borders. You ask where the tune came from. She shrugs. Everywhere. Later, a ceramics artist shows you designs that came from Damascus and blue glazed balls with lotus patterns, echoing both east and west. We painted what we saw in dreams and trade, he says. He offers you a cup of jasmine tea and points to the kilns where fire still roars. You sip, and the taste, as the sun sets, you walk through a garden filled with medicinal plants. A guide points out each one: licorice root, chrysanthemum, ginseng, explains their routes across the continent. You imagine ancient caravans, not only carrying wealth. You kneel beside a flowering bush brought centuries ago from India. Its name has changed over time, but its healing purpose has remained. As dusk falls, you find yourself at a small shrine built by travelers. Its stones are etched with proverbs in 6 languages. You trace your fingers over them, feeling each curve and pause. One reads, "A journey shared becomes a story eternal." You whisper the words. You realize then, it was a moving classroom. It taught those who walked it how to see, how to listen, how to connect. And now, as you stand beneath the stars, the wind carrying scents of rose and sand, you feel a quiet truth rise within you. The greatest treasure the road ever carried was understanding. You begin this leg of the journey under a vault of stars, walking along the high plateaus of the Pamir Mountains. The air is thin. Beneath your feet lies a path once called the roof of the world. Traders crossed here, carrying more than goods, they carried empires. A crumbled watchtower looms in the distance. Your guide pauses and whispers, "Cushion," on a remaining slab. You imagine a sentry watching the horizon, for lanterns flickering in the dark. Further down, a seasonal bazaar blossoms. From barren rock just, the market breathes in a dozen dialects. At one stall, a woman threads her fingers through folded indigo cloth. "Persia," she smiles. 3 moons ago. She shows you ivory combs from Cambay. You continue past a blacksmith, hammering coins etched with Greek and Sanskrit. You ask why. He shrugs. Because this road listens to every voice. Near the forge, a woman offers rose jam in copper bowls. Shiraz roses. The taste is sweet, familiar, layered. A reminder. Flavor travels to leaving the bazaar. The Mogao caves rise from sandstone cliffs, hidden vaults of art and belief. A monk welcomes you with a quiet nod. He carries a lantern. On the walls, travelers and pilgrims walk side by side, some in robes. The Silk Road moved body and spirit. In one chamber, celestial musicians float above painted clouds. They played for every traveler who dared to dream. In the heart of the caves, you sit before it. Outside, a farmer points toward the cliffs. 1,000 scrolls were hidden here. You see a replica scroll-linked silk, its script dancing like breath. You walk deeper into the Gobi. Sand glides across dunes like liquid. Then, in the distance, a crescent-shaped oasis emerges like the moon resting on earth. Crescent Lake. You kneel by its shore. The water is cold and clear. A traveler beside you holds a bronze coin with a Roman eagle. "Found here," he says. You marvel at the distance. it traveled, and in Jiujuguine, stone, massive, quiet, a gatekeeper. He lets you climb the watchtower. From the top, the wall stretches east, vanishing into haze. Below, the land murmurs with history. As you descend, a gust of wind seems to whisper names you'll never know. You travel with nomads, now they're Bactrian camels, bearing bells that chime with each step. At night, they build a fire and share salt bread and warm milk. Different stars, their leader says. She sings in a language without borders. You fall asleep under a sky that has watched thousands of such fires. In the Gansu corridor, a caravan leader tells of battles and treaties, generals and poets. Peace, he says, was the rarest trade on this road. At a riverbank in Lonzhou, you watch silk bundles unloaded from wooden boats, from factories upriver. A boatman says, the river speaks, the road listens. He lets you trace the grain of the boats, whole centuries of touch. In a nearby tea house, the leaves were once currency, she says. She pours slowly. You sip the green warmth. She offers a scroll tea rituals written in Sanskrit, Persian, and Chinese. Every cup is a meeting place. You journey next to a monastery. Monks, their study maps, drawn on silk networks of dots and lines, connecting cities and souls. One monk gestures to a red mark. The edge of the world, he says, he replies. He shows you a bone compass, gifted by a traveler. It still points true, he says. You feel it pull not to a place, but a feeling. In the valleys ahead, he shows you cocoons, but 1,000. It shimmers. You think of how many hands silk has passed through, how many stories woven in its strands. In Bougie, one girl recites, a journey begins not with a step, but a question. Another adds, the wise carry more stories than goods. The teacher draws a network of dots and lines. The Silk Road, he says, was never a line. In the final stretch, the city feels different. You walk the old streets, past spice stalls and stone walls. In the Muslim quarter, a boy hands you one. Bells chime in a nearby mosque, while temple drums sound in the distance. The city pulses in harmony. You visit the Wild Goose Pagoda, where sacred texts were once stored, carried across deserts and mountains. Climbing its narrow stairs, from the top, you see the city unfurl roads, rooftops, people, and beyond that, memory. At the steely forest, one reads, to pass is not to vanish. You take a rubbing of the stone. The breeze carries traces of cinnamon and salt. You think of all who came before, merchants, monks, mothers. It's a rhythm, a whisper shared between strangers, a thread that still weaves through us all. You begin this new stretch beside a quiet riverbank, where morning mist curls around your feet like silk. The sun is a pale disk behind gauze, and the water reflects nothing but thought. A fisherman nearby draws in a net woven from horsehair. He smiles and gestures toward a woven basket filled with river pearls. For Nanjing, he says softly. You ask, how far? He only points downriver. The river carries whispers of porcelain, tea, and lacquerware flowing, like a living artery from the heart of China to its waiting fingertips. You step onto a narrow wooden barge. The oars dip in silence, cutting the water like quills across parchment. The boat glides past willow groves and bamboo villages, each one reflecting centuries of stories onto the mirrored surface. As the journey unfolds, in the galley below deck, workers sip tea, brewed over charcoal. The scent of green leaves and faint salt merges with the morning air. A trader unfolds, a silk scarf dyed a fierce crimson, the pigment drawn from crushed roots. To Rome, he murmurs. Each ripple of silk is a whisper across continents. You pause to touch a ceramic vase, packed in Strot's glaze, luminous, pale as moonlight. Jingdazan, says the craftsman beside you. We fire it with kaolin and pine ash for 6 days. His hands are blistered but proud. You pass stacks of scrolls, wrapped in patterned cloth. The characters speak of harmony, of wind, of enduring patience. One scroll shows an ancient Maprivas, curling like dragons, cities marked with red dots, and indecipherable poetry. Night falls slowly as the river darkens to ink. Lanterns flicker along the shoreline. You arrive in a port thick with the scent of star anise, fish sauce, and smouldering pine. Porters hoist bundles onto their shoulders and vanish into alleyways hung with silk banners. A boy offers you candied lotus root on a stick. Its sweetness lingers. In the market square, merchants squat behind tables covered in jade figurines, glass beads from India, and bundles of dried chrysanthemum. You run your fingers over carved combs and hand mirrors. Nearby, a woman sells inkstones and brushes made from crane feathers. They carry calligraphy across lifetimes. She tells you. You nod, understanding. A caravan. You join it by lantern light. The path ahead veers north again. Beside you rides a man carrying medicinal herbs. Ginseng, dried scorpion, snake gallbladder sealed in wax. He claims they cure memory loss and night terrors. Others carry salt bricks. A woman rides with boxes of tea long. She speaks of a temple in the Wui Mountains, where the leaves are harvested in the silence of dawn. You climb higher, the forest thinning into low hills. Cicadas sing their invisible choruses. Your camel, too, seems quieter here steps, careful on moss-covered stones. You reach a monastery carved into the cliffside. It's held together by beams and belief. Monks light candles in silence. You join them in their stillness. An old monk offers a wooden bowl of rice and a smile that contains entire dynasties. Before dawn, you descend into a broad valley filled with mist. A stone bridge arcs over the river. Merchants place offerings before crossing. They whisper words to the wind. You follow winding paths until you reach a city of whitewashed walls and emerald tiles. This is Luzheng once, the capital of 1,000 dreams. The streets are wide and orderly, lined with peach trees and scholars. Inside a public hall, his voice carries the weight of law and poetry. You rest at a tea house where water flows beneath the floorboards. Each cup is poured with ceremony lifted, high, lowered, slow, allowed to breathe. You sip pu'aha. You feel its story settle inside you. An artisan unwraps a puppet made of leather, its limbs jointed. We perform history, he says, so no one forgets. At night, the city glows with lanterns painted in crimson and gold. Music drifts from rooftops and courtyards. A girl in silver slippers. You sit beneath a paper lantern, shaped like the moon. Its light is soft, like memory. In the final moments before sleep, a whisper, or the weight of silk on a weary back. And then you remember. The journey is the road itself, the stories it gathers, the people it binds, and the quiet awe it leaves behind.